Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we're joined by Mr. Rahin Virani. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for your time on this lovely Friday night. So to give a bit of background, you graduated from PET in 2017. You were involved with United Nations as well as SHISM. We'll talk on that a little bit later. You then went to York to study psychology. And the big thing that we want to talk about is you currently run your own business, being a productivity and life coach with your own company, Craft Your Purpose. So that's definitely something we want to talk about a little bit later. But starting from the beginning, what were some standout moments in high school for you?
I think the most standout moment was being the president of the Model UN Association at PET. That gave me a lot of good opportunities to develop my leadership skills. I was able to not only develop my skills in terms of presentation, debate, discussion, moving dialogue forward, doing research, policy analysis, but I was also able to train other people, especially I was in grade 12, so I was able to provide some guidance to people who are a little bit younger. And I went to the Southern Ontario Model United Nations, which is based out of the University of Toronto. And this was for high schoolers, though. But I actually won Best Delegate out of a roster of around 140 students. And I think I was able to do that because I was able to basically not only prep a lot, but I was able to express myself. And that's one theme that I want to get out to is that the standout moment in high school was not only me understanding myself better, or, there wasn't like one specific like event, but it was more of learning to find my voice and learning to express myself. A couple of other things I did in high school, out of the York regional, I believe it's like a skills thing. There was a public speaking competition in which I placed silver in the York region. So just like things that are helping me today, honed those skills in high school. And I think that's something that is so important for people who are in their secondary school to really focus on the skills that they want to use as in the future as they're going through life.
Those are amazing insights, especially as it relates to interacting with other people. I think, in high school, everyone's can be very much like me, me, me. But I think you raised a great point about leading other people, delegating to your classmates, teaching other people how to improve on certain things. Were these kind of factors that played into your decision to studying psychology?
Yes. I think one thing that really stood out to me in high school, I think I was around 17, so around grade 11, is that I wanted to be a psychotherapist. And I came to the realization that I would have to like do a master's and it was quite a long path ahead. But the skill of coaching people, of providing support, whether that's emotional, intellectual, or just being there as a friend, as well as helping people in very concrete ways. Like I mentioned with Model UN, I also was involved in DECA for, I believe, 1 year in the human resources management portion. But a big thing I would also say is that it's about really finding those opportunities and linking them to post-secondary. And I'll give you a quick example. When I was in grade 12, I had a situation where I was able to take a tour of like York University, and on that tour, I immediately approached people, I approached faculty, and I know it sounds odd to say this, but like in just like 3, 4 hours, I was already able to make connections, right? And it's really a matter of I think that's more important than the psychology degree is like how much of positive psychology are you using in your day-to-day life? And I think that's a very good starting point, I would say, is when you're in high school, having the ability to create those win-win relationships, being outgoing, approaching people. I think this is really good skill set to have.
And it sounds like you've been leveraging those skills, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Were there any standout moments in university for you? How did you kind of apply your learnings from high school into your university career?
So I'll tell you something really interesting. I have ADHD, and it was something that I struggled with a lot in high school. And I'll kind of give you an example. When I was in grade nine, my grades were quite like below average compared to like the average pet student. Like I was kind of getting like low 70s in math. I was like getting like 65s, like um and I kind of realized that if I wanted to get into a good program, like I wanted to get a master's degree, I would have to really take my academics to the next level. And I think my focus on improving my academics, using productivity methods, tools, and some of which I want to discuss today with you, I was able to go from like getting like like a 68 or 64 in math in grade nine to like getting like a solid like 86 in data management, right? Which was really helpful in university because I was able to get like an A plus, the highest grade in statistics, which is definitely important. So I think the key takeaway here is if you're struggling with academics, really finding the way to improve your personal productivity, your effectiveness, your discipline, your willpower, your tenacity, your resilience. These are things that I developed as I went into grade 10, 11, and then 12. And I was able to, make it to the honor roll. I was able to get a couple of scholarships, and that wouldn't have been possible for grade nine of me. So I made a few good decisions between when I started high school and I ended high school to get to that position.
I think that really shows, perseverance, grit, discipline, determination, all these things that helped you, reach that path that you aspired to. And I think it's really important because a lot of times some people are just like, you need to try harder, right? And that's not necessarily the most productive way to go about it. So I really like how you talked about, these like proven methods that can really help you, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And, so that helped you throughout university. So after university, at what point did you kind of know that you want to start your own venture?
So there were a couple of points. I think in university, I started coaching, some clients here and there. In the beginning, it was friends, but I was able to kind of enlarge my network. And in the beginning, I would do it for free, but sort of I had this kind of realization, um, kind of halfway through, like that, I could really start charging for this and make this into a professional activity. So when I thought about that, it's really about providing value. I will kind of say this is that when you're doing anything for free, it doesn't matter the quality of it because the person who's receiving it doesn't have the highest expectations and their investment is quite low. Um, but now, when I'm charging clients like, you know, larger amounts of money, whether that be in the thousands for a package like I've done for a client, or just even just simple sessions that are like, let's say, exceeding, let's say, $100 USD. That's an expectation that a client has, and you really need to step up to the game. So I think one thing is that um, if I could have changed things, I would probably have charged money earlier because your I would say your competence creates confidence. And I think that what will push you to become more competent is if you rise to the expectation that others place on you, and thereby you create that expectation within yourself.
hmm I think that's great advice. I was going to ask about, getting those first few clients is probably really difficult for any startup. Were these like close friends or were they like kind of like weaker ties to other people? Like, how did you go about finding your first few clients?
My first few clients, it started within like friends network, within my network, but it sort of started expanding to people that I had looser ties with. I think if you're starting any kind of business, it's very important to talk about your business to people you know. So even if you're like selling speakers, you're selling software, even if it's an irrelevant software to 99% of people, you don't know if that person that you're talking to would know somebody who needs your service. I think a mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make is they judge the individual in front of them and they're like, oh, this person doesn't need my product or service. But they kind of miss that that person probably knows 200 other people. And maybe one of those 200 people this person knows might need that service. And I think it's really about seeing beyond what's in front of you and more about looking into the possibilities of everybody you meet. And more importantly, the possibilities of their network and how to leverage their network for your own success.
Right. I think that, yeah, networking is super important on this page. Looking beyond the one person, I think is super important, right? So when you had these first few clients, what was kind of the learning curve for you in dealing with people of different personalities? Were there any people who maybe, didn't want necessarily to admit that they, had lacking productivity? What was the dynamic kind of like?
So that's a good question. I think there's a part of self-awareness where if somebody is looking out for a service and they're like, hey, I'm interested in talking to you, that already shows um, a huge sense of humility, right? That if someone's reaching out or they're interested, they want to book a consultation call with you, they usually know there is some problem. What ends up happening though is that as you work with the kind of person, you end up identifying much more than what they initially came with, you know? So I've had clients, for example, that have come to me for productivity. One was coming to me for looking for a job and how to go through the interview process. One of my clients that I'm about to put on my website for a testimonial, when I met him, he had dropped out of community college for computer science, and he was basically running a Minecraft server, right? And he was, making, let's say, roughly 20,000 US dollars a year, kind of working part-time here and there. And after working with me, he actually ended up getting a job that was $105,000 USD, and this was without a degree. This was just based on the skill set that he had. But bridging that gap was the social fitness, the social skills, because he might not have gotten that job, or it might have taken much longer, or he might have needed to develop more skills or had more accolades to get to that position if he didn't have the social skills and the ability to sell yourself. Right now, I work in software sales, so I do coaching on the side. Eventually, I'd like to do that full time, but I think a big part of being successful in the workplace, as well as even getting a job or maintaining it, is communication skills. And I think that is like the hidden key that takes somebody from a, basic executive to like a C-suite executive. I think that really bridges the gap.
Right. It's everyone's really a salesperson, right? Every time you meet someone, you're basically selling yourself, you're selling your abilities, your experiences, things like that. So I can definitely see, where your side hustle and your job like kind of overlap. And I think that's a really valuable skill for everyone to have. So you mentioned productivity, like they come to you with a productivity concern, or like what else can you kind of help people with other than the productivity?
I think some people are stuck in their role at work, and it's really about, from like an HR perspective, how can we level up this person, whether that is a horizontal transfer, whether that's a promotion, whether that's even seeking out a new industry, right? What I really specialize in is not only the productivity aspect or the job aspect, but really building a holistic lifestyle and living a purposeful life. And the way that I help clients do that is I help them do the following. First, I help them understand their values, really drill down on what they find to be valuable, what they find to be meaningful. Even if they don't feel that sense of meaning, they will have inklings or some desires, some signals, right? It's really about finding what matters. And then it's about how we can design a life or create or craft a lifestyle that helps them align with those values.
Mhm.
And it might sound simple, but you actually need to sometimes do complete 180 turns in a lot of areas of your life. And it's something that I've helped my clients when it comes to personal fitness, mental health, dating and relationships. It can extend even to talking about like vitamins, supplements, like experiences, travel, right? it's not necessarily that I specialize as an expert in every single one of the areas. It's more that I've developed a competence that I'm able to leverage not only my skill set, but I'm able to bring out the expertise of that individual and apply and help them apply that to their own life.
Right. I think, yeah, what you mentioned, super valuable. The skills that they do have, you just need to bring them out, right? Some people don't even realize it within themselves. And I'm glad you talked about values, because I think in high school, a lot of time we kind of think, oh, I want to do more for the world, or I want to save the earth, things like that, right? But then a lot of people might get stuck working for a company that might pollute a ton, right? So it's all about values. So going off that, like you talked about these skills that you bring on other people, how much would you say that your experience in psychology has helped you with this coaching?
I'd say a lot. I would say a few fundamental things that a big part of my understanding was developed by reading books, right? And actually non-academic, um, knowledge. So even though I ended up, not pursuing a degree, a master's degree, I was able to sort of leverage insights that I got from, source material. Another thing is I've just supported so many clients that most problems that somebody or issues or concerns that a client brings to me, it's not my first time dealing with it. And I think that amount of experience is what helps me push forward. And I like that you reflected on this idea of bringing out those skill sets within the person, because I fundamentally start with the assumption that the client knows what's best for them. I'll give you a scenario. What is the difference between a coach or a therapist or someone who's a professional and someone like your parents or just a random friend or like an uncle or aunt, right? One big difference that I fundamentally find is that when you get advice from like 95% of people, 95% of people, they project their own values onto you. So they say like, hey, I think you should do this because of XYZ, but they're not taking the time and the respect to ask you about your XYZ, what your values are, what you want in crafting that life and doing those decisions based on your values.
Mhm.
So I think having somebody in your corner, right? Somebody who cares about what you want, what your values want, and is willing to, at some point, bring their own values to a side and to make them secondary and tertiary. I think that's a big, big starting point.
And I can see where there might be, a little bit of conflict. How do you kind of handle these situations that might be difficult for some people?
I think when a situation is difficult, it's for a variety of reasons. One reason is anxiety, right? That there's like this worry. And the anxiety usually manifests as a worry of the future, which is like if I make the wrong decision or if I make no decision, because there's also cost to inaction, which I think a lot of people underestimate. But it's about really dealing with an anxiety. And the way you do that is clarity, right? You bring clarity, but another thing that I'm teaching my clients more and coaching them more is acceptance of the variability of life. Ultimately, we can't guarantee outcomes, right? So, for example, I'm moving to Mexico permanently. I sold my car, I got rid of most of my belongings, and I'm literally packing up two suitcases and a small roller bag, and I'm moving my entire life into a foreign country in which I don't really speak the language, um, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? And it's about dealing with that uncertainty. And I think that's important. So when a challenge happens, it's really about understanding where is the fear coming from? Where is the anxiety coming from? Where is the distrust coming from? I think getting to the base level of these emotions is so important because once you can figure out the base level of these emotions, you can really start to make that real inner change and that transformative change.
Right. I think, yeah, thought journaling, super important, understanding your own emotions, things like that. And we talked about before, circling back to, productivity. And you mentioned before that you wanted to talk a little bit more about some techniques. So I know there's the Pomodoro technique, which a lot of students use. Do you have any other techniques that you could share?
The thing that's stopping you from being productive and from getting the things you need is not external, it's you. Because ultimately, you're the person that's unfocused. You're the person that is going away to distractions. The first step I would say to increasing your productivity is to completely eliminate distractions. Have blockers, right? You can have an app that I'll just throw out is called Screen Zen, right? Their quality time for Android, Screen Zen for iOS, iPhone, like lock out all the distracting apps, lock them up from your computer, from your phone, eliminate distractions, right? If you can eliminate distractions, that will create a space where you can either do one of two things. You can either act towards what you need to do, or you can pause and recover, right? So that's the first thing, eliminate distractions. Number two is set clear expectations. And the way I recommend clients do this is with timers. So what I like to do is I like to set a timer, and you talk about Pomodoro, and stick to the timer, right? And the whole point is we're trying to cultivate a muscle of focus, right? I think the best way to be productive is to engage in deep work. And I want to define that more specifically. Deep work is engaging in practices in a deep and focused way that provide the best results and the most results for the least amount of time invested. So if you can work deeply, you will end up doubling your productivity. I actually have this guarantee that I give clients that I will increase your productivity by at least 30%, or I'll give you all your money back. Because I'm so confident that if you follow the right strategies and you have the right mindset, you will really substantially increase your productivity. Another key thing for increasing productivity is maintaining a sense of discipline in other areas of your life. I think a lot of people think of productivity as it's just about like the workplace, your business, but if you're undisciplined in other areas of your life, and I'll give you the most key example, sleep. If you're watching Netflix late at night, if you're like consuming alcohol or coffee too late, and you're just kind of like on 5 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep, you're not going to be productive, right? If you're eating food, sugar-laden food, simple carbs, you're not going to be as productive. So it's not just about what you do while you're working, it's also what you're doing outside in your life. And that's why I think you need to have a holistic approach to productivity and look at the whole person's lifestyle to help them get to that point where they can say, you know what, I'm making some great changes, I have some great outputs, and I feel better about the work that I'm doing because I'm investing less hours and I'm getting a higher result.
So great advice for anyone, whether it's a student, a worker, even at home, increasing your productivity, things like that. You touched a little bit on the mindset that goes into it, and as a student, I hear a lot of people saying you need to like study in like the same place every time, a quiet place, a clean space, not study beside your bed. Are those kind of things that you also talk about as well?
Yes, I would say for students, there's a huge amount of variability. Some people, they like studying at home in a desk, right? Some people, they like studying in coffee shops or libraries or Starbucks or whatever. I think you have to experiment. I think the biggest takeaway from a student that is watching this is you have to constantly experiment because like I'll give you a quick example. Some people they like listening to heavy metal music and working. Some people like chill lo-fi beats. Some people like no music at all, right? The only way to really understand this is to actually just experiment. Another thing I'd like to touch upon is accountability, right? Accountability is so important, right? So if you're a student making friends with people in your class and saying, hey, let's study together, even if it's virtually, even if you're not talking with each other, right? Another productivity tip I will drop is body doubling, right? So there's a website called FocusMate, and there's many websites like this where essentially for 25 minutes or 50 minutes, it connects you via video to a person that is looking to engage in a deep work task. You talk for 30 seconds, you just say, I want to do this, what do you want to do? And you just do the work, right? And the reason I'm giving that to you and to your audience is that there's always this excuse like I'm too shy, I don't want to I don't have anybody I can do an accountability partner with, and I want to put that to the side. So ideally the accountability partner is in your day-to-day life, but if not, go on a website like Focusmate or like 10 other websites like this and just see if you can engage in accountability, and that will supercharge your productivity.
I like how you've mentioned, a lot of these websites, apps that can help you. How do you stay like up to date and informed with all these technologies and resources that exist?
I would say the worst thing you can do is constantly seek out information. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people, for example, they open up the news every day. Or, some people, they'll open up their bank account every day, or they'll open up their stock portfolio every day. And they just want to overload themselves with information in a constant stream. It's good to seek out information, but you need to do it from effective sources. So every morning when I wake up, I'm not Googling the best productivity techniques. I follow people who are curators. So I follow, let's say, 6 to 10 people that I trust. One name I'll throw out there is Cal Newport, author of the book Deep Work. Another one is Tim Ferriss. James Clear, many other names we can throw out, author of Atomic Habits. And I see what they're curating for me, and I leverage that, right? So I would say if you want to stay on top of things, you want to pick people who are curators, people you trust, that are well versed in what you're doing, and people who have some level of notoriety in their communities, and learn from them.
Very cool. Learning from other people, I think, is always super important. And I'm a little bit curious more about your business. How did you come up with the name Craft Your Purpose?
Well, one, it wasn't taken. So that I just wanted craftyourpurpose.com. The biggest thing is that craft means to build, to create, right? And I think when it comes to purpose, I think you need to create your own purpose. And what I mean by that is a lot of times people, their purpose is kind of something that is apparent to them because it's a part of their culture, right? So for a lot of people, especially at PET, because like PET is like it's a school that over indexes on success and over indexes on material success, like getting into a good university or getting good grades. And it under indexes on engaging in fulfilling activities. And I think if you kind of make your purpose to make a lot of money and to, drive a nice car and to live a life of luxury, and, to buy like a $1 million house, I think that this can only serve you if you are a willful participant in this. I think a lot of times, Nathan, people are going into and playing out social scripts that they've been given. So it's not really that they're so passionate about a $60,000 Tesla. They're not jumping out in the morning so happy about the Model Y. It's more of they want to feel good. They want to feel good by the perception of other people. And I think a part of crafting your purpose is blocking out the external people in your life that are pushing their product, their purpose onto you. You said it best, like everything is sales, and I think one thing that we forget is people are constantly trying to sell their ideology to you. A big one is your parents, right? Always trying to sell their ideology to you, at least most of them. So yeah, gotta watch out.
Yeah, especially with the political landscape, I feel like everyone's trying to push your ideas onto other people. I'm glad you talked about the pressure that exists at PET. Just wanted to kind of ask, what's the difference between crafting your purpose and finding your purpose? Like, to me, they sound similar, but what's the main difference?
I love this question. Oh my gosh, what? I need to write this down. The difference is simple. Finding your purpose has the assumption that your purpose is out there waiting for you. And I don't know if that's true for the vast majority of people. I think the vast majority of people have to build it, right? It's not like waiting for you that it's like somewhere out there. It's somewhere in here, and you have to build it into your day-to-day life. So I think that's the fundamental difference between finding and building and crafting.
Great. Yeah, I actually remember there's like a research. This was done years ago, so numbers might be not be right, but your happiness only increases up to like $80,000 a year, or something like that. And then after that, it's more about the fulfillment of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, things like that, right? So I guess you talked about your purpose, which is helping other people, inspiring other people, teaching them all these tips. Are there any other like aspirations that we can look forward to seeing from you?
I think a big aspiration is community building. I've consistently hosted many events in Toronto over the past few years. Um, and the events I've hosted are like philosophy, psychology conversations. I've tried to host them all in person. And I think community building is so important. So one thing I aspire to be is I aspire to build communities, be a participant in communities, and I think what people really long for, especially in modern society that's so disconnected, is they want purpose, but they also want to feel loved, to feel cared for, and to feel valued. And I want to build opportunities for people to receive that.
So yeah, that sounds like something you're building your legacy towards, someone who cares about people, someone who helps people, someone who lifts people up. Is there any other part of your legacy that you really want to cement in history?
I actually don't believe in legacy.
No.
I think that legacy has a big backdrop of ego. Like, oh, when I die, I want to be remembered, right? Like you meant like history. I'm not trying to be history, make history. I'm not trying to be remembered. In fact, 100 years from now, most people will forget about me. And probably 200 years from now, nobody will even say my name. Maybe even less than 200 years. Um, I think we lack this humility that is so important that, most people, the biggest impact you can have is the people around you. And it's not so much about making history or building a legacy as much as it is about in the present moment that you're in, helping people in the present moment. Because it's so easy to get lost in the long term, right? And going back to PET as a high school that over indexes on success markers, I'm actually going to use that term markers of success because it may not be success itself. And I'll put that as something to think about. But I think that idea is that there's this push towards long-term development, foregoing instant gratification. And I think a lot of that is misguided if it's not balanced. So, for example, I know you probably don't ask this question, but I'm going to ask myself a question. Like, what are your regrets at PET, right? Because that's a question I would love to talk about. I think one thing that I regret most at PET is I didn't build my social circle, my community more. I wasn't like I basically went to zero parties. I had no girlfriend. I had very few good friendships. Like I had maybe a handful of friends. And I wish I had focused a lot more on the social aspects of high school, even if that would have sacrificed a bit of the grades that I would have gotten or some of the accolades that I received and that I sort of humble bragged about in the beginning of this interview.
Yeah, yeah, no, I don't mind you asking your own questions. It's great that you talked about that. Yeah, are there any other piece of advice that you would give to your younger self or anyone watching?
The biggest advice that I would give to my younger self or to somebody who's in high school that is watching this right now is put a lot of effort in, right? And I don't mean in academics necessarily, because I know your parents tell you put a lot of effort in academics, but like actually like putting in effort into all aspects of your life, right? I think that if you are intentional if you're learning about yourself, your values, you're learning about what you hold dear. And I think if you can attune yourself to that and really start making small steps in that direction, I think your high school experience, your post-secondary or your work life experience is going to be so much better because you've already built the fundamentals. And I think that can be a huge leg up when you transition into the real world.
Yeah, I'm glad you've, kind of demystified the whole idea of success. What is it to you? I posted a podcast before called How Do You Measure Success? And that was really insightful. I guess I really like how you called them success markers, because having good grades in itself is not necessarily a success, right? It's more, it's just one, measure of success. And your whole purpose is helping other people. And you mentioned before this one story of that one individual who you helped land a huge job. Do you have any other like really like standout stories without giving away too much personal information?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you one more. I worked with a lawyer who was, like kind of stuck in terms of income wise, right? He landed this big job at this top law firm downtown Toronto, and he really wanted to make it big. And when we worked together, we're still working together, so this is an ongoing client, but we've worked together for about 2 years and I've helped supporting him in doubling his income and really magnifying his reach. And it's gotten to a point where he actually has a high enough income to bring people on his team, to hire assistants underneath him, to do all like he works in employment law. So with any job, you have parts of the job you don't like doing. And it's so amazing when you can hire people to do those parts of your job that you don't like. So not only was he able to double his income, he was able to remove the kind of unhappy or kind of onerous parts of his life, but he was also able to spend more time with his young son and with his wife and his family. And overall, that is helping him in leading a more fulfilling life. And I'm very proud to have supported him and to continue to support him on his journey.
So it sounds like you're learning a lot about, whether it's law, different people, you're learning about, different businesses, things like that. So that's all well and good. Similar to me learning about these different things on this podcast. Um, Lastly, last question for you. If you could nominate, another PET grad or any number of PET grads, who would they be?
I think you should reach out to Adnan Rehman because he's someone that's been able to leverage his computer science skills to get a really good job at OPG. And he's able to basically make a more meaningful impact in the workplace. And it would be really interesting if you can kind of learn more about him and what he's doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always looking, to learn more about different industries and of course the people behind them, such as yourself. It was really great talking to you about, difference between crafting your purpose, finding your purpose, the different productivity techniques you talked about. So it's been great. Thank you for your time on a Friday night, like I mentioned before. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll see everyone next week.